Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. I'm with my co-host, Ann Zeta, and boy, did we have an interview today.
We did. It actually knocked everything else off the agenda for this podcast because we had such an incredible, in-depth interview with a really impressive person.
Yes, and so we've been craving to identify far Fort Worth residents and hear their perspective. And with all that's going on with Keller ISD, and they have an upcoming school board meeting this Thursday, we got the privilege to sit down with Lainey Halls with Texas Freedom Read. She's also a mother of 4 kids who go to Keller ISD schools, but she really gives us a full understanding and robustness of what's happening all the way from the beginning of book bans to now. Here is Lainey Halls.
So I've lived here for a little bit more than 8 years. My husband and I moved here with our 4 children in the fall of 2016. We actually moved here October 1st that year. And the first thing we did when we drove in was to make sure we started getting our paperwork together to get our driver's licenses to register to vote, because there was a very important election that was coming up, right? So we got here 8 years ago. My husband's job moved us here from Buffalo, New York, which is where at that point we'd been raising our children. But we are originally from Utah. So Buffalo was an 8-year in between. Now we're here in Texas. And that's pretty much, my Texas story. I am a transplant. And living here in Texas has been interesting because when we moved here, we moved to suburbia, right? And we started to realize really quickly that none of our neighbors were from Texas either. And much of our community was in the same situation we were. They were transplants, right? Maybe they came here for a job. They had come to college. They had met someone, right? And so really, it's interesting to be in suburban Texas where not everyone is Texan. And some people joke, right? I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could. I don't know that is my motto by any means. But it's been an interesting experience to live in what I would call suburbia, full of lots of different people.
What was the process of getting to Keller? Like you said, your husband before he was working downtown. What's like the process of moving here? What do you see leads to kind of the choosing? Do you feel like most of your like Keller family, neighbors are very like they're like, this is great, they love it, or is it like what's that dynamic for most people?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And when you were talking, it made me think about when you moved here, you were looking to live in the city. And my husband and I and our 4 children, we left Buffalo where we did live in the city proper, and we loved it. But our children were getting older and we needed a big backyard. And we had 4 of them, right? That is a lot. I'm now realizing, now that they're all growing, how much work that is. I think if I realized how much work that would be, I may not have had 4. I love them all individually, but it is a lot of work. And so when we were looking to move here, we'd never been here before. We had no idea what we were looking for. We loved the city. And we looked into the city. And we looked into the neighborhoods that reminded us of North Buffalo. And we looked at the schools. And it was hard, right? And we had been running into some problems in Buffalo with the schools, and that was some busing issues, and my children were at different schools that were far away from each other. And obviously everybody wants to send their kids to good schools, right? And that was one of the biggest challenges in Buffalo was it was a lottery system there. They called it school choice, but you would put your name in this hat. You would hope you get in. And if one kid got in, some of the schools had sibling preference, but there were a handful of the programs that didn't. And then you hope one child gets it. And so you have kids in a million places. And as we were looking at that, like every family with children, you look at the schools. I mean, that, right? Like when you choose to have children, you know that while you're raising them, they are your priority, and to make sure they get the best life and the best opportunities and the best education. And also, I want my kids to go outside and play. So I needed a backyard and parks and green space and good schools. And also walkable schools where my children could walk to school and come back. That was a big deal to us as well, because I have 4 and they're going to be at different schools and I'm going to be driving around. And we did a lot of research. And of course, what popped up was, hey, Keller ISD, right? Yeah. And it was a reasonable drive to downtown Fort Worth for my husband. And it looked great. So we started asking around. We started talking to people. Someone knows someone who lives there, whatever. And it came back. We had heard a little bit about Aledo ISD, but it was a little bit further out. And so we chose Keller ISD. We found a house to rent for a year. We lived there for a year. And our kids were in Keller ISD schools, and they loved it. And so we weren't going to move. And so then we bought a home a few blocks away. We bought a home by a really big park with lots of green space because we love to be outside. There's a creek in it. So we moved here for the schools, which is the exact reason all of my neighbors moved, right? Anyone who moves in with kids moved here for the schools, which is why what we're talking about today and why I have been so propelled into what's going on in North Fort Worth / Keller, because of what's happening to our schools. And it has been the most infuriating, frustrating experience, maybe of my life, to watch my children's schools and education be hijacked by outside interests. I don't know how many people, I'm sure most people in Fort Worth can watch the news or read generally to understand what's been happening in Keller ISD over the last 3 years.
But if you could give us kind of the context.
Yeah, we were saying we want it to be base level for people who
don't know. Okay, so about 3 years ago, some PACs came in. We didn't realize it as a community. They used book banning as their way into the door, as their to get in, to terrify people. And we as parents didn't realize what was happening because behind the scenes, a PAC had come into our community, Patriot Mobile. They're America's only Christian wireless cell phone provider, but they also have this side business, which is a giant PAC, which takes money and funnels it into Christian conservative causes. And they had been behind closed doors going into Keller ISD, South Lake, which is Carroll ISD, Grapevine, Colleyville, and Mansfield. And they went in and interviewed and handpicked 11 candidates that they were going to back. And they picked that number, and they picked a certain number in each district because if they won those seats, they would then own a majority on the board. And they put over $500,000 into those races. This was spring of 2022. And they won all 11 seats. In fact, you can find there is an interview with Steve Bannon and the CEO, Glenn Story, of Patriot Mobile, where Steve Bannon talks about, and they brag about, in fact, Steve Bannon actually says that school districts and school boards are the key that picks the lock. And they brag about taking over 4 school boards. And we instantly saw these boards begin to collude. They all hired themselves one singular political attorney to represent the boards, which my taxpayer money pays for, even though the school districts have their own attorneys. They all hired a man named Tim Davis, who turns out is also the Tarrant County Republican lawyer, and he currently, just recently, got a new job representing one of the TAD board members. He's also close with Tim O'Hare, who recently appointed him to the board of JPS. And he's deeply involved with this far-right political movement that's trying to take over Tarrant County. But they started with the school districts. And Keller ISD was there. And very soon after, we started seeing policies be passed in our district that were unnecessary and often cruel, a waste of taxpayer time and money. One of the first things they did was institute a book banning rubric. They call it content guidelines. I call it a book banning rubric. And it's a rubric that helps them decide what books are not allowed in our school district. One of the promises that these trustees, the school board trustees, ran on was they promised so the year leading up to this, which is what got everyone wrapped up and which gave them this path for success, was fall of 2021 when Matt Krause released his list of 800 books that might be in your children's schools and to go look for. And they sent people to go look for a bunch of them to then become like hysterical, ultimately, terrify people, take pictures and things out of context, terrify the community with them, and then convince them that our children needed to be saved by trustees who would come in and, to fix this. So that's how, right? So interestingly, this is where I got involved, right? So it was fall of 2021. I saw this movement and this hysteria, and I started going to school board meetings, which were ultimately a circus, right? So we have pastors who are speaking, calling everyone to repentance and praying. We have people crying. We have people yelling. We have, and if there are children listening, I'm going to give them a heads up. We have giant posters that say reading, writing, arithmetic, and blowjobs, right? We have people, And it's terrifying the community. And I'm watching this unfold, and I can see that it's disingenuous, right? This isn't because our school district had a policy. If you have a problem with a book, you can challenge it, right? Pretty simple. Turns out, up until fall of 2021, no one in the history of Keller ISD had ever officially challenged a book, ever. Because, like normal people, if a parent had a problem with the book, they would just go talk to a librarian and say, I'd really like my child not to be able to check out this book. And then everyone would respect that, right? But this was not about that. This was about terrifying people and also controlling what
Everybody's children reads.
everyone had access to. Yeah. So 41 books were challenged in a matter of a month. First time any book had ever been challenged. And we had a policy in place that said, if a book is challenged, you call up a committee, you read the book together, and then you decide what to do with the book. And our school district was like, well, we need help with these committees because every committee was different, which is great because you don't want the same 5 people deciding every book. So every committee was a group of parents, librarians, administrators. It was an administrator or a teacher who taught the grade level for which the book was for. They invited parents and community members to be on. And so I signed up to be on the list. And I was called up to review The Diary of Anne Frank, the graphic novel adaptation. And we sat in that room, and the person who challenged the book didn't show up to talk about why they had challenged it. And the argument was this book has inappropriate things in it and should only be read under the direction of a parent. And we discussed it, and we unanimously voted to put this book back on shelves. Because why in the world would we ban The Diary of Anne Frank, the graphic novel adaptation? Which, by the way, none of the words in that book are not from her diaries. It's not like they took liberties and rewrote it. It's her diaries. So it was exciting. I thought, hey, we made a difference here. In the midst of the school board madness, they win. And one of the first things they do is they decide to overturn all of the book challenge committee recommendations because all of them, every single book challenge committee that was called, voted to put those books back on shelves. Because turns out when you evaluate a book as a whole thoughtfully as a community and you have parents and educators together, you realize that these books aren't pornography. These books aren't terrible and horrific. You realize some of them are valuable. And acknowledging not every book is appropriate for every child at every age, right? We're not putting All Boys Aren't Blue in kindergarten. No, nobody's asking a first grader to read The Kite Runner. These are books for 17 and 18-year-olds in AP English literature, right? Anyway, they decided what they ran on was these committees were stacked with woke people by our woke school board. We had a school board of 6 conservatives, like Trump donating conservatives, and 1 moderate. They were not woke and liberal, right? In fact, I had all sorts of issues with some of the things they'd done because I thought I thought that they should be more open-minded. But because they wouldn't join on to that cause of demonizing all of this, they were then labeled the wokes. And it upended everything, and they overturned, and they pulled The Diary of Anne Frank back off of shelves. And the Bible was pulled off of shelves as well, because that was a book that had been challenged kind of we think that one was like a joke challenge, but still they had to take it seriously. So all of those books were pulled off of shelves. And I tweeted about it. And that threw me into something that I did not know was, that threw me ultimately into the national conversation. There were then phone calls for, interviews on CNN and I think it was like the Jerusalem Times was calling, and I probably did 30 or 40 interviews in 2 weeks talking about that experience. But that was just the beginning. And that all happened August 2022. And here we are, January 2025. And what we did is we watched this new school board. They had 4 seats. They now have 7, right? Now new PACs are coming in as well. The 1776 Project PAC has come in. All sorts of new organizations continuing to fund school board races. I want to tell you this is interesting. I know I'm like talking and talking.
Great. This is exactly what you need to do.
It used to cost in Keller ISD, which is 75% in Fort Worth and Fort Worth students, with a little piece in Watauga and some teeny pieces in North Richland Hills and Colleyville, like a few streets. And then about 25% in Keller, right? Proper. It used to cost to run for school board about $5,000, right? We have 32,000 students there. Boring suburbia, right? School board meetings used to be outrageously boring. You would have a popsicle parties for some friends. You'd talk to your neighbors and you'd run for school board. Now it costs well over $100,000 to run. And that's just your own money. you have to also probably have at least that much money in PAC support, right? Because these PACs are also paying for tons of advertising, right? And so it has become impossible for the average person to run for school board. And this political machine that we're fighting is so horrific, and they will paint you. They will destroy you and your reputation, right? Like we had one conservative board member named Bev Dixon who was respected in the community. Again, you want to look at her campaign donations. This woman donated like $250 to Donald Trump's first campaign. This is not a woke liberal, right? She's still a conservative. She and I are good friends, and we disagree on a lot, but she's a decent human being. She ran again, and the things they said about her and the names they called her, and to demonize her in her community and to convince. In fact, their other side created a pretend progressive organization, created an endorsement of this woman from a fake progressive organization, and then texted it to all the conservatives saying that she had been supported by this organ that didn't exist. And it applauded her for being progressive and supporting diversity and inclusion. And it wasn't even a real organization. Like, it doesn't exist, but sent this text message to all the voters, all the conservative voters in Keller ISD, right? So this is what we're up against. It's not normal, right? And then the same people sent a text to all of the liberals or the Dem voters, right? Because it's with a picture of her campaign donation to Donald Trump, and said, don't vote for Bev because she is a diehard MAGA. And so then they're convincing, and remember, on school board races, there's no party affiliation on the ballot. So now they're convincing a bunch of progressives who aren't educated to go vote for the guy who's funded by the far right PACs, because they've just convinced them that this other woman is MAGA, right? So that's the kind of disinformation we're seeing. And that's the kind, and they're ruining people's reputations. The names that they call people, I can't even begin to tell you the things that have happened and I still remember one of the first accusations against me that kind of hit my soul as a mother. And I remember reading it, I think it was on Twitter, and it was a woman in my community who said, you can take your anal sex abuse fetish and force it on your own children. And I was just sickened, right? Like it kind of makes me emotional to think about, right? Because I'm a mother and I want no harm on my children or any of the children in my community. And I'm fighting for them because I love my children and I love my community. And accusations. At one point, one of the school board members, the school board president, his political strategist, who's also deeply involved with Patriot Mobile and the Tarrant County Republican Party, when we started our local organization called Keller ISD Families for Public Education, we didn't have a lot of money. And so we didn't have the money to pay for a P.O. box. And so I put the organization in my address, which was fine. I knew I'm not hiding that I'm part of this. But we're not going to go pay for all these things. We don't have this money. And when we kind of went live with it, he went and looked it up on the thing, and then he published it. He tweeted my address with the deed to my home. And he said, we've got this anti-family Antifa adjacent, Satanist who is coming in with dark money to destroy Keller ISD. And then it was me, and he tweeted it. And then sitting state legislator Nate Schatzline retweeted it. And it took about 36 hours for Twitter to take it down for doxing, and I had to file a police report. But the attacks that they put there is a Facebook page that's just committed to videos about me, right? And it's fine. Now I'm used to it. Now it's whatever, bring it on, right? When you go for these kinds of attacks, we're not even talking about the issues anymore. So this is what we're up against, right? And it's not local. I mean, there are local people who are part of the players, but the money funneling in is actually about Tarrant County. And it is about, there's ultimately a plan to overtake and to own every seat on every governing board in Tarrant County. That's why they've gone to TAD. They're going for the county commission. They're going for city councils. Right. So if you watch closely, and they're having a little bit of a harder time here in the city of Fort Worth, right? But you saw what happened. I don't know if your listeners saw what happened to Manny Ramirez in the fall when he voted against removing college voting locations, and what this far right overtake of the Tarrant County Republicans had done. And Beau French comes out, attacking, right? And then Matty Parker comes to his defense. And Manny Ramirez, again, he and I do not agree on a lot of stuff. He is a tried and true conservative, this guy. And they are now labeling him as this. It's the same thing we saw up there, right? And it's, so this, what we're up against in the school districts is the same thing. They've decided that the school boards are a great place to take over. So that is what's happening, right? And that, again, this all started the fall of 2021. So now, right? So there are so many stories I could tell you in between of what's happened in 3 years about the policies they've passed and the harm they've caused. But this organization that we founded as parents is called Keller ISD Families for Public Ed. It is me and about 600 of my closest friends. Where we have a secret Facebook group. People know it's secret. They can't find it because it's secret, where we discuss these things and we plan and we prepare. And over the years, we've kind of become known in the community as if you see something shady happening, especially within the schools, then call us. Tell us what's going on. You don't have to put your reputation on the line, or if it's a teacher or like a librarian or an admin, you don't have to put your job on the line. We'll figure it out and fight it for you. We'll figure it out. So I don't know if anybody here followed last February when our trustees brought a Dutch film crew into one of our high schools to film an episode of a docuseries called God, Jesus, and Trump, and they snuck them in under false pretenses. So that was a real big deal. And that, again, we were able to uncover due to all these tips. Really what broke that case for us was all of our children had cell phones, and they had taken pictures of these people. So we all saw them. That was a whole thing, which you can go read about, right?
Yeah.
So these are just things that are happening.
Yeah.
So fast forward.
Now they want to ban cell phones. So
They did.
Yeah.
So now they can't have cell phones in schools, which I will say as a parent, I'm not actually. It has generally been really great for our kids. I've got 2 high schoolers. They are distracted by their cell phones, and I'm
distracted by my
right.
cell phone.
So I will say that I am not actually against that policy, but I had a sit-down conversation with my children, and I said, if you see something, you can get your phone out and you can record it. And I will defend you for that decision. I'm not going to defend you because you saw a cool thing and you want to take a picture of your friend. But if you see something like what happened where my son recorded this Dutch film crew that was recording him, or something that's bad, or that you can take out that phone and record what's happening, right? So my children know that, and I do appreciate the policy. But really, it's been great for the district. I'll say that. Moving on. Last December, in fact, just barely a few months ago, on December 20th, I got a phone call. And it was someone who said, Lainey, I have something I need to tell you that's going on. I said, oh, okay. And this happens a lot. I actually get phone calls from people I don't know, or people I barely know or I've heard of. And sometimes I'll have to vet them while I'm on the phone with them to make sure it's not like a fake phone call trying to get something out of me. But they said, hey, Lainey, I just got, they said there's something happening. And the school board is secretly planning to split the school district. And I said, what? And they said, they gave me some details about the split. And they're going to try and do it kind of under the radar very, very quickly without any public input. And it's probably going to be fast, coming up very soon, January, February. And this person said, that's kind of all I know. They gave me some other details. And they were like, do with it what you need to. So I immediately went to a very small knit. We have a tighter knit group, and I took the information to this tighter knit group, and I said, we got to figure this out. We're not going to release this. We have a public Facebook page. We have some social media pages where we release information, but we try not to release it without some,
diving into it to
a little
figure out
validity, right?
Yeah. How that's very responsible of you,
right? And when we release information, we will often say, hey, this is a rumor, or
right.
this,
I saw the original
Yeah.
tweet that you guys did.
Yeah. And so we waited. We started asking around. We started kind of poking the bear, right? We started kind of dropping some rumors out into the community in places because we knew we needed a little more information. We needed people to start talking. So turns out, it's so funny that quote unquote gossip is actually really powerful when you're fighting a regime that's so dishonest and that has all power and control, right? It's so funny because you shouldn't be gossiping. That's one of the things. I'm sorry. There is a lot of value here in using this as a tool in the community. So we got some more information. We talked to some other people, and it started coming together where, hey, this is real. But I decided when we heard it, we were like, well, how is this going to happen? So I went and read the education code. And this is where the rest of Texas needs to pay attention. This is a real big deal. So I went, I was like, I got to read about this, because how in the world can our school board just do this? Because people had talked in the past about, at some point when we get that big, there may be a split. It's like, well, that's really hard to do. It's a big deal. So I went and read chapter 13 of the education code. And it talked all about the need for an election of the people, right? And I was like, well, that's interesting. And the election required 25% voter turnout. That's
going to be a big hurdle.
That in a May, because our school board races are in May, that's not going to happen. They could maybe push it to a November election, and they might get more people. But a May election, no way you are ever getting 25% in the suburbs in Texas, right? We're lucky if we get 11% for school board races, right? So I read the education code and I thought, this can't be right, because I know something about my school board. They do not come forward with a plan unless they know. First off, they've already decided. They never come forward with a plan to the public that they're actually taking public input. They might pretend, but they're not. Anything they bring to the public, they're going to do it. And they already have a path forward to do it, right? They will not be stopped, and they won't be humiliated, right? And so I thought, how could they do this? How is this possible? So I went and read the education code a second time, and instantly I read this. I knew exactly there's a little loophole in there. There were some words that even I was like, And there's a piece that talks about if you want to split or detach, you can either have a petition to the county commission or a resolution by the school board. Now, the way the law was intended and the way the law has been applied and interpreted for decades is that both the petition and the resolution require an election by the people. Either one can be presented to the county commission, but the county commission then sends it back to the people for a vote. Well, in rereading the law, I saw that the language, every time it talked about an election, it talked about the petition, but it never referred to a resolution again. And a really unethical and shady way of interpreting that if you want to think like someone who's trying to overtake a government and subvert the will of the people, you kind of have to think that way. Then yeah, it's right there. Let's try this. Let's see if we can pull this off. In fact, I went and presented it to a number of attorneys, and they were like, "No, that's not it's not how it was intended. This is not how the state has never applied it this way or interpreted it this way. And really, no one should interpret it that way." And I was like, should? What do you mean by should? And they were like, well, I mean, if you have the best interest at heart, you wouldn't interpret it that way. And I was like, well, then we have our answer, because these people don't. And then you realize there's one check and balance in this law, and that's the county commission, right? The county commission is the one that would accept the resolution or say you have to send it back. And guess who the county commission is? We've got Tim O'Hare and Matt Krause, who have taken all the same kind of PAC money, who are working with all the same people, who are sharing all the same lawyers, and they're all in bed together. It is we in North Fort Worth, up in Northeast Tarrant County, we lovingly call them the Tarrant County Cabal, right? And you can watch, anybody who's following it can see what's happening. The ones that tried to turn on Manny Ramirez, the ones, so we've got one check and balance, and they're colluding, right? At least that's our conclusion. I guess it hasn't been proven, so I'll say that. But it's not hard to put the pieces together, right? And guess what? Matt Krause has already released a statement saying that this, and surprise, surprise, the county DA has released a statement saying we will accept this interpretation of the law. So here we have it. So like I said, we got this tip. And we decided, once we had some things verified and we saw that we were going to release it to the public, because they needed to know. We also had gotten a tip that the vote was probably coming up very, very soon. At this point, we're getting tips from multiple places because people are starting to talk. You can only keep a secret like that for so long, right? And now that we've done more research and more work, we realized that Tim Davis had spoken to TEA. We know that they had been speaking to an education consulting firm in Austin called Moat Casey. So now a lot of people are knowing, right? And they're talking to their friends. It's hard to keep a secret like this behind closed doors. I'm sure they're telling their spouses, who are telling a friend who's like, promise you won't tell anyone. Well, they're telling us now, right? So we drop it on Facebook, and so then one of our kids' city councilmen, Charlie Lauersdorf, he's a Fort Worth city councilman, he sees the rumor, because we drop it in all the places where the people who need to see it will see it. And he's like, hold on a second. I represent these people. Is this real? He drops a post on Facebook where he has texted every trustee. He has texted Matt Krause. He's texted our superintendent. He's texting county commissioners. And he said, is this true? This rumor I'm hearing, I need to know now. He drops it on Facebook. Well, it turns out that makes some people real mad at him. He gets a phone call from one of our trustees who reams him out for making them look bad, but who pretty much confirms the rumor. And then our city councilman, who, give him credit, again, he and I don't totally align politically, but I really appreciate that he's fighting and that he's like, hey, we're not doing this in the dark. You better speak up. And he releases a statement saying that it had been confirmed. And that's where we are now. We had a school board meeting last week. 120 people signed up to speak. The community is overwhelmingly against it, and the board is moving forward. And we believe, we don't know at this point, because their little plan has been befuddled a little bit because of this outcry. So now they have to pretend like they're getting community input. We don't know how long that sham will go on until they push this through to the county commission.
Thank you for such a articulation. I have two questions. My first question is around why the split? What's the motive of doing the split?
Great question. People are like, oh, is it about money? Yeah, there's money involved for sure. And there are a lot of pieces I can't tell you because we'd be here for 17 hours. The plan is they want absolute total control over a small school district to turn it into a district with Christian conservative values. And ultimately, we believe they're going to find a way to kind of privatize it. So a lot of people in Fort Worth may know the name Monty Bennett. He owns the Dallas Express, where he uses his newspaper to write articles trashing public education, right? And he even uses it for op-eds trashing school board candidates in our community, right? It's this, ultimately, this pink slime propaganda, quote unquote, newspaper, whatever, we'll call it that.
Yeah, we usually don't call it by name.
Well, okay, there it is.
No, it's okay. People should probably know.
Right. Yeah, anything you read there is funded by a far-right movement. And so Monty Bennett is involved, and you need to go research him. And he has this little scheme sham thing that wraps up charter schools and vouchers and private schools and public schools. And he has all these avenues. He tried it in Wemberley ISD a few years ago, but most recently tried to pass this plan in Princeton ISD where they would approve his business, where they would take public dollars and funnel them into private schools. There's this loophole in the law. It's kind of like the way to get their own vouchers. And he also, from our research, is maybe involved in a bunch of charter school plans. Well, guess who's been donating to school board races across North Texas? Monty Bennett. Guess who donated tens and tens of thousands of dollars to Tim O'Hare's campaign? Monty Bennett. And the attorney that's working with them that tried to pass it in Princeton ISD is Tim Davis, who's also our attorney. So there's a piece there where he's probably going to come into a new Keller ISD and like institute this plan, which is also a way for the district to make some money, but for him to make some money. So there's many pieces. There's that financial business piece coming in that we believe would probably come in. And then there's also this control where they want to turn a public school district and make sure that no quote unquote progressive ideas get into the schools. They want a curriculum that is based on one narrow worldview, and it's going to be easier to do with a small district. And then there's also the demographic of things that are going on in Keller. And the goal is to split the district at the railroad tracks. There are two giant demographic pieces on the west side of Keller ISD, and that is differences from the east side, and that is a racial difference and a financial difference, right? The demographics on the west side are less white and have less money, and they believe ultimately that the west side is dragging them down. And they're tired of a lot of the progressive voices on the west side. They are very clear that, a liberal can never be on a school board to poison the children.
And all of these seats are at large.
Oh, so that's a whole other piece, right? Yeah. So at large, for your listeners, means that you can live anywhere and be on the school board, anywhere in Keller ISD, rather than single member districts, which would be like city councils, where it's by neighborhood or by area, because then you're representing
some of the other ISDs,
yes,
single member districts.
In Texas, it's mostly at large. Well, guess what? We have 7 trustees in Keller ISD. Remember, 25% of the population is in Keller proper. 75% is not. 5 of the 7 trustees live in Keller, right? And the 2 trustees that were blindsided by this, who were backstabbed by their friends, who were also pack-picked and were all in on these plans until this, live in Fort Worth. So the 2 trustees who were not let in on this plan live in Fort Worth. And the other 5 who are going to vote to pass it through live in Keller. So we have these people, and we'd also been working as an organization in North Fort Worth to get Keller ISD to be single member districts rather than at large. And that's a project we've been working on since the last election. And they knew that was something we were working on. And they knew that if Keller ISD became single member districts, then they would thwart this plan because then we would have true representation and they couldn't just buy off individuals. And so this is also part of why we think they're trying to push it through so quickly, is because we were actually working with some organizations to get working on a petition to bring that onto the ballot. So it's just this huge, there are so many pieces to this.
Yeah. And with so many pieces, it looks like you have like the Charles Lauersdorf and the Nate Scatzline who are supporting. I saw
this
they're
has been a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
And what we found out was Nate Schatzline and Charlie Lauersdorf were kind of left out of these conversations. And I think maybe specifically in the case of Nate Schatzline, I think his ego might be a little bit bruised because these are his buddies, right? Like, why wouldn't Tim O'Hare and Charles Radcliffe call him? And but also their communities, the Fort Worth side, could suffer. And if their communities suffer, it's going to be harder for them to win re-election because, when people are mad, they want new people in office. And I will give Charlie Lauersdorf more credit than Nate, because Nate in the state legislature, well, Charlie is our city council person, but Nate in the state legislature, who now kind of released this statement saying, I don't think this is a good idea. He has been so against public education for so long. He's one of the main voucher pushers he's a pastor at Mercy Culture and would therefore, and his children go to Mercy Culture. He would greatly benefit from a whole lot of voucher money funneling in for his job and his children, right? So, and he has been one of the main drivers in holding our school funding hostage. So I give him no credit for this. I'll go on the record and say that. I just think it was his ego was bruised that he wasn't involved. And it's going to make Fort Worth really could suffer. And it's not good for him if his district gets screwed over and he wasn't fighting for them. Because like I said, when something bad happens, even if it's not the person who represents you you still just want new legislators or new representatives that will fight for you. So I think this is a little bit of self-preservation on Nate's part. That man has been fighting against public education since the moment he was elected. Yeah. And that's been frustrating.
Yeah. So then my next kind of question is, where else is this happening outside of the Metroplex? Or is the Metroplex, North Texas, really the epicenter of this?
I will say that Tarrant County is the epicenter. And we're seeing even the huge financial money funneling in to Tarrant County specifically. It really it has become a target of many major, national far-right organizations because it's the biggest, we know this, what is it? I think the biggest urban core conservative county left, even though, let's be honest, we're very purple. We're like 50-50. And so there has been a focus on certain counties in America, and Tarrant County is one of them. We are seeing real, big money coming into Tarrant County. We're talking in maybe hundreds of millions of dollars are setting up shop here. And so this is part of a bigger movement. This isn't. So we're seeing little things like this happen all over Texas in school districts. We've seen it. It's not just here. But we've seen other school districts and other communities kind of push back against it, right? They kind of push back against the Moms for Liberty ideas. They're like, hey, there's one thing that I feel like a lot of conservatives and progressives can agree on, and that's protecting their community schools. I think there's a study out there that says that 77% of people surveyed love their own schools, right? We all right? Public education. Really, even many of the conservatives in the legislature, we watch them get primaried by the far right because real conservatives, like the traditional Texas ones, they love public education, especially rural Texas, because it builds their communities. Also, it's in the Texas Constitution. It is mandated by the Constitution to fund a free, efficient public school system. This is a constitutional mandate. Anyway, so it isn't just Tarrant County, but it is, we have had a harder time fighting it because of the resources that have been funneled in. If it was just our community and we didn't have these millions of dollars coming in from outside, I believe we could have beat it. But we are up against a machine.
Well, and it's crazy so much that we fight about people coming in from the outside and controlling, that's a whole battle all the time. But in this case, I guess people are okay with that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it's counter to what they claim, right?
Yes.
Keep it local. Oh, except for
local
this,
control.
this is not local.
Yeah.
Right. This is not, you are taking direction from other people. And they're all kind of opportunists as well, right? I mean, they're getting some love and attention and power and money, and it's fun. And
so give me like the Keller ecosystem, like what percentage are like pro this, and like what more people are like have no idea, and like how many people are on camp? Like, I guess, like, tell me the
one
dynamics.
exciting thing is we finally have everyone's attention. We have been for the last 3 years screaming for everyone's attention, and we've gotten some, and we're even eking in the elections. We're getting a little bit closer to being able to beat these people with just true door knocking and community building. But we finally have everyone's attention, and I will tell you, the North Fort Worth residents are up in arms. I have people who have harassed me and called me names and made videos about me over the last few years who are in my inbox saying, I know we don't agree on everything, but we know you're powerful and you have a voice and you seem to have everybody's attention and we're willing to help. I mean, these are people that have done terrible things to me. I had one woman come up and shake my hand and give me a hug and apologize to me. It's frustrating. I'm glad they see it now.
It's hard not to hold on to grudges like
that.
Yeah,
I'm not even a grudge holder, but my concern is that if they lived on the Keller side, they'd be all in. So this is still self-interest. And I wish that people, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm not someone who's going to be like, no way, get out of here. Like, hey, your enemy of your enemy is your friend. And I believe people are complicated, and I believe we kind of build visions of people that we don't know personally of who they might be, the way that this community has painted the movement that hates me has painted this picture of me that's not true, because I have plenty of conservatives in my life, like these, whatever, where politically we don't see eye to eye, who are like, Lainey, the picture they're painting of you isn't true. Like, I know you, and so I'm trying really hard. I really do want to build community. I'm not about like party loyalty at all, right? I'm like a born and raised, tried and true conservative my whole life until this kind of shift happened in my late 20s. And as I watched the political party I was raised in not be the political party I was raised in anymore, right? And so I will never be a party loyalist again. I never really was, but I'm true to what I believe in. And right now that's building a community that I can raise my children in, and that I'm helping the community around me and help because as a mother, you hear the phrase, it takes a village, right? My gosh, you don't realize how true that is until you are raising children. You don't realize, something I've learned about public educators or school teachers, I never realized before I had children how much they would be helping me raise my children. I never realized how valuable they would be. They love my children, right? These educators, I have someone who is with my children 8 hours a day who loves them. They go into teaching because they do love, right? They love my babies. They watch out for them when they get hurt, when they're in tears. They call me, they text me, they email me. And now I have 2 teenagers, right? I have one who's exceptionally stubborn. And he just thinks he knows so much better than my husband and me, right? He does. And my
parents are
right?
dumb as a
and
box
we're
of
idiots,
rocks,
right?
please.
He won't listen to us. He's done taking our advice. But guess what? He kind of listens to some of his teachers, and they're helping me parent him. I can get a phone call. Hey, I can say, I'm worried about Henry, my son. Would you just, and they do, because they want my children to succeed. So I'm trying to see these people in the community who have vilified me and done some terrible things as parents, who want what's best for their children, but for some reason are scared. Because if I live up to that name of someone who's awful that they've painted me as, then I'm letting them be right. And if we really do all want what's best for our kids, I just want to help people see to look outside of your own self, that you can actually lift others while you're providing for your own family, right? There is a way that I really believe, the rising tide lifts all boats. And I just want people, it's frustrating that we finally have everyone's attention because they're being affected personally, right? Their property values, their children's school district. But man alive, North Fort Worth residents are coming together, and of all shapes and sizes, and yeah.
I was wondering, like, could you see that property value thing starting to could shift though, because like you don't want to send your kid to the really religious one school,
right? No, so funny that you say that, because all of us parents are like, if this came to the ballot, would we actually vote for it? Like, to get away from this movement that's happening in Keller, and we might, and that's okay if it goes to a ballot. That's representation. If that's our choice, yes. But we're also we don't trust these people. And guess who's in charge of we call it like the divorce judge who's in charge of the division of assets? Tim O'Hare and the commission. They're the ones that get to decide the division of assets. Sure, the law is written that it has to be equitable, but we do not trust this group of people to do anything that looks out for anybody but themselves. And we know that they broke laws. We're in the midst. We have filed police reports. We have met with attorneys. We're trying to we're after the police reports are done, we're hoping that county DA will investigate. There are some clear Open Meetings Act violations. The law was broken. It's not even like maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It's like laughable that they like, hey, Tim Davis, the attorney, maybe you should have thought about this. Like, what? The law was broken. So we have that. And then there's a whole other issue where we have some law firms who are coming in to help. And that is this like socioeconomic, kind of a racial component, right? Where they are trying to draw these boundaries down a racial barrier. And this is what I also wanted to say, which is all Texans. This is big for everybody. If the county commission lets our school board pass this resolution, which is a brand new, shady, unethical interpretation of Chapter 13 of the Education Code of the law. Again, not how it was intended or how it has ever been interpreted or applied. And many argue still can't happen, but we've got the county commission saying it can. This will make it so that any school board in the state of Texas can look at their school district and cut off any neighborhoods they want, as long as it's 8,000 students or more, right? This is going to bring a legal route for segregation, and nothing can be done about it. We've been in contact with some members of the Senate Education Committee to say, hey, Chapter 13 might need be amended. We might need to go in and fix some of this language, right? So it's a big deal. It's more than just. I mean, it could be a huge deal for the state of Texas.
So, I think EJ started at the beginning talking about asking you how you got involved, because a lot of what we try to do here is give people a path to get involved. Mm-hmm. Much of the story that you shared is a little terrifying.
It is.
And I'm approached constantly by people who are asking, should they run for office and things like that. And, through my experience, I've had kind of challenging things that would make one steer away from doing that. But what can you share with folks about ways to positively get involved and encourage them? Because you clearly have, you're educated on this beyond belief. And that's kind of intimidating for someone who's like, I don't know all the ins and outs, but where can I plug in?
That's a really good question. And I do have the answer. And first off, the education I have is simply, everything I've told you is because I'm on the ground learning it along the way, right? There were mistakes made at the beginning, things I've learned. But I'm not the only one in Keller ISD who's fighting this. I have become much of the public face because it's just my personality. I am someone who doesn't get scared very easily. I'm also not super bothered when people are mean to me, especially the people who I don't really respect, right? And that's my place. That's my strength, right? Is being out in front, using my face, using my name, and communicating. But like I said, I have all of these other people that we're in this together, and they all have different strengths and abilities. There's some people who are behind the scenes, some people who are helping gather data. I have a friend who's really great at submitting public information requests, and I'm not super organized and really good with numbers and dates and deadlines. And so there are people who are great with that. And I'll say, hey, we need a public information request for X, Y, and Z. And they can submit it. Or other people who are also out in the community talking to people. So there is a place for every personality and every style. So you find what you're comfortable with. But the big first step is finding people to work with, because there's nobody who can do this alone. It's too lonely, it's too overwhelming, and it's discouraging. But if you kind of turn it into a more of a community and a social thing, it actually becomes really fulfilling. And I've made, this is so like cheesy, but I've made so many friends, right? One of the best places is, if you're really interested in getting involved, is to go to the city council meeting or the school board meeting and watch the other people who are speaking, who are sharing things that you align with, and then just introduce yourself. Find out in your community and your neighborhood groups, who's talking. You see a comment, hey, I appreciate your perspective. Like, is anybody by chance getting together? We get things like that all the time. So yeah, you need to find what you're comfortable with, start there, and then start pushing yourself to get a little uncomfortable too. But there is a place for everyone. And it's going to take a little bit to maybe push out of some comfort zones to at least socially go get to know some people. But speaking at school board meetings and city council meetings is a really big one, the county commission. And that can require some bravery. But that's a simple thing. But yeah, there's a place for everyone in all of this. You just have to find what that place is for you. And it might even be starting really local, that's not even political. And if public education is your passion, then you join your PTA and you start to kind of realize some of the advocacy issues, and you get to know, if you're on your PTA, you're going to get to know your school board maybe a little bit better, right? And so you just start small with what you're comfortable with. But I do believe the greatest power is in building the relationships with others, so you can build a community. This is so much easier when you do it as a community. So it's just start there, and then do what you're good at. Find what you're good at, and you lift there, right? Because not, like I said, there are certain things I'm terrible at. And some people hate public speaking and would never be comfortable, being the face or going on the news. And that's okay. Not everybody has to be that. It'd be too much anyway, right? Like, we all have different roles. So yeah, I would tell everyone, if you have something that you feel passionate about and you want to advocate for, then find where those conversations are happening, find some of those circles, build some relationships, and then find out what you're good at, and you do that within that. And then you'll also be more fulfilled. And I really believe strongly in like the social contract and community. I really believe in bettering our communities, and that's kind of part of my driving force. And so that's probably why there's that social aspect for me. I mean, if you hate people, you may have to at least introduce yourself to someone, but you could be a behind the scenes person who runs some numbers and helps with, maybe there's an organization that needs someone to be their treasurer. Yeah. Like that's like there's
that
like
is a hard one to fill.
Right?
Often.
It is.
Well,
Nobody wants to do the number stuff.
I know there's a Keller group of people who say they won't, like, they're not the face people, but they'll like be the social media people. Like, they're really good on social.
Oh yeah, they can. They can run an account that doesn't have their name on it.
And they're good.
Yes, for sure.
Well,
that's what I would recommend, I think.
Well, Lainey, thank you for coming on to the 817 pod and now being a part of our community. We've learned so much, and hopefully we get to continue to be able to hear more in the future, and we're all champion, all Fort Worth, for what's going on at Keller ISD.
Dopamine swipe, follow us like double tap.